Good evening, hockey fans. After a week off to watch Game 5, we're back. And we've got a brand new Stanley Cup champion. We're going to recap all the action tonight on the Neutral Zone. Recap Stanley Cup Finals. We're going to talk to the coach, Bruce Cassidy, see his take on it. Talk more Arizona possible landing spots for the Coyotes. Oh, sad howl. What a year for Stan Kroenke. And lots more coming up next on the Neutral Zone. So, strap on your helmet, don't get checked into the boards, stay out of the penalty box, protect your 5-hole, and let's light the lamp. Good evening and welcome on into the Neutral Zone on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'm your host, Zach Puplis. Adam Karnik has the night off after a week off where we watched the last bit of the Stanley Cup final and watched the Vegas Golden Knights secure their very first title, very first Stanley Cup. We are back and tonight we'll recap some of that action from last week. Also, we're going to talk about how both team owners had a history at West Point and how that played into their ownership of both teams. We are going to talk about Bruce Cassidy and how he feels about this title, as well as some possible landing spots for Arizona if they do wind up moving out of Phoenix/Glendale. And we'll talk about the year of Stan Kroenke. He's won an NHL title, an NBA title, and as well as an NFL title now. Wow. Busy year. And it seems like everything he touches turns to gold. And lastly, we'll talk about plastic rats on the ice. Or maybe it's octopi or catfish or flamingos. But whatever's being thrown on the ice, or maybe it's just even hats for a hat trick, you got to be sure that it's a fun time. All right, so let's get into it here. Before we jump into it in earnest, we've got some housekeeping to do as always. For the last 9 years, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've continued to be by the fans, for the fans, and with your help, we're ready to take the next step. When you go to our website, iesportsradio.com, you'll see our Patreon link with 5 different tiers. First one starting at just $5 a month. This donation gets you shout-outs on all 32 of our shows. Higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to our podcasting university, even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment. Thank you all very much for continuing to make IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. That being said, we want to thank our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised, M. Los Great, Key to the Gate, as well as Anonymous. Okay, so with no further ado, let's hop into it here. Recapping the Stanley Cup Finals and Vegas's win on their route to their first ever Stanley Cup. To be honest, no matter who won, there was going to be a brand new Stanley Cup winner. So that in and of itself is exciting. Gosh, I wonder. The last team to have won their first Stanley Cup, I think was actually the year that the very first year Vegas was in existence, and they made it all the way to the Stanley Cup Final. It was the same kind of proposition. Either they were going to win their first cup in their first year, unbelievable, or Washington was going to win their first cup, and Washington wound up winning, of course. But yeah, throughout this run, Vegas is definitely, their owner set a high bar to begin with. Playoffs in 3 and cup in 6 or something like that. And sure enough, they won the cup in 6. But they've been to the playoffs 5 of the first 6 years. They have made the cup final twice now, and now they've actually won a cup too. So, they're setting the bar high, and ain't no one gonna bring it down. All right, so how did they do it? Let's see. This is Greg Wyshynski, ESPN. How Golden Knights disrupted the NHL and won the Stanley Cup. The first time Braden McNabb thought about the Vegas Golden Knights winning the Stanley Cup was when owner Bill Foley spoke it into existence in year 1. Playoffs in 3, cup in 6. There we go. Defenseman said with a grin, recalling the owner's words back in 2017. Then the Golden Knights went ahead and made the Stanley Cup Final in their inaugural season of 17-18. After we did that, Bill said, okay, now Stanley Cup in 3. I don't know if that got published, forward Riley Smith said. From one perspective, it was an understandable goal from an enthusiastic new owner. From another, Foley's timeline was completely bonkers. There had only been... There had only been 6 franchises in NHL history that required 6 or fewer seasons to win their first Stanley Cup. 5 of them won between the birth of the NHL and the repeal of Prohibition in the U.S. The Maple Leafs were the first in 1918, when they were the Toronto Arenas. The OG Ottawa Senators, 1920, third season. Montreal Maroons, 1926, in their second season. The New York Rangers in 1928, their second season. And the Boston Bruins in 1929, their third season, would follow. The other team was the 1984 Edmonton Oilers, winning in the franchise's 5th NHL season. But the Oilers actually started as a franchise in 1972. They just didn't arrive in the NHL until after the World Hockey Association folded. Also, they had Wayne Gretzky. Major footnote right there. I think that makes a big difference. Wow. But it's not so bonkers now after seeing the Golden Knights skate hockey's holy grail in front of their euphoric fans on Tuesday night. Side note, all my friends who pay attention to hockey, I'd see them at work or wherever, and we'd be chatting about it, and, what do you think? Who do you think's going to win? And what do you think the outcome's going to be on, Tuesday night? And I said, well, the way they played games 1 and 2 in Vegas, yeah. With the series going back to Vegas, I don't think Florida had a chance. I mean, the fans were already on the cusp of winning, and they were just so ecstatic in the and the scores were so, the games were so, they got out of hand early in favor of Vegas. And so for them to be going back home with a chance to win the cup, oh yeah, of course it, like, I figured it was going to be something like it happened, the blowout 9-3. That's just insane. That's like the most, I think we said the most goals scored in a Stanley Cup final game. It's insane. It's wild. Okay, so back to it. I think the first year we got scared of losing it, and now we wanted to win it, forward William Carrier said. We've been through a lot the last couple years. We've been through it all. The Golden Knights have packed a lot into 6 seasons of existence after entering the NHL as its 31st team in 2017. They are essentially hockey's great startup company, a collection of misfits that created instant success and then faced the mounting pressure to grow from those carefree days into a thriving, sustainable company with 10 times growth. It got real. Hearts were broken. Friendships were severed as beloved founders were bid farewell. It sucks. It happened a lot here, McNabb said. But give them credit. They're doing whatever they can to try to win. We're Vegas. We've got to be different. The difference between other NHL owners and Foley is like the difference between the manager of your local strip mall and Jeff Bezos. One builds for the modicum of success, while the other wants to rule the world. The following are actual things Bill Foley has said about his NHL team. We want to be a global franchise. The visitors to Las Vegas can't get a ticket because we're sold out. But they're going to buy gear. They're going to be back in Shanghai wearing a Golden Knights hat. My goal is to be a dynasty here, not to win a Stanley Cup, multiple Stanley Cups over several years. Foley was a self-taught investor while attending West Point. He devoured books about technical analysis. He read the Wall Street Journal each day to track about 30 stocks on his self-created charts in growth industries, such as regional airlines, with their consolidation in the market making Foley a considerable profit. His classmates expected he'd lose all his money. He didn't, at least not until Foley blew the money on women and alcohol by his own admission. Later in life, after a law degree and an MBA, he made enough money to pool it with other investors to buy what would become Fidelity National Financial, the biggest insurance title company in the U.S., as well as other businesses. His investment philosophy... No. His investment philosophy will sound familiar to anyone who has followed the Knights. A, quote, value buyer who made around 80 acquisitions that Foley estimated were valued at $40 million, that they paid $20 million to get. Quote, we were around the fringes, Foley said. Las Vegas is undoubtedly a sports town in 2023, with the Knights Fortress, T-Mobile Arena, situated a short drive from the Raiders' sleek Allegiant Stadium, a.k.a. Roomba, seating over 80,000 fans combined for games. But it wasn't a sports town when Foley got his inkling about owning a team there here. It's easy to forget how seemingly uninhabitable the Vegas sports landscape was in 2014. For decades, it was the gambling aspect that kept professional leagues away. That stigma faded in the decade leading up to the NHL expansion. Although NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman was clear that no betting should be available inside the Vegas arena, and that the team name should steer clear of gambling references. The real question vexing owners from the NHL, NFL, and beyond was whether this market could support a pro team. Another Las Vegas owner might have taken the easy path to proving viability by fueling a ticket drive with casino commitments. The genius of Foley's bid, and the one reason the Knights exist today, is that it had 11,000 deposits for season tickets from non-casino sources, without a team, without an arena even built. People from Las Vegas wanted something more than the Strip. They wanted something that was theirs, so we tapped into it, Foley said. Getting the first pro franchise in Las Vegas for a $500 million expansion fee was Foley's first disruption. It created an immediate bond with fans in a way that relocated teams couldn't, especially a vagabond franchise like the Raiders. The Knights adopted the slogan, Vegas born, early in their existence. The relationship with fans, immediately cemented through the team's reaction to the October 1st, 2017 deadly mass shooting, has proved it's more than a marketing ploy. Branding is vital for any startup. Memorable name, eye-catching emblem, quotable slogan. Foley chose Vegas Golden Knights. We're Vegas, we've got to be different, he said, and he helped design their logo. The shield represents how they defend the honor of the city. Foley said the knight, quote, protects the unprotected. Ironic when one considers how vital the unquote unprotected were to building the Stanley Cup champion. That's funny. We were prepared, I can tell you that. Foley's second great disruption was the expansion draft, where his management team took full advantage of the NHL's liberal new rules. Vegas entered the NHL during a time of expansion draft rule remorse. Imagine an owner paying millions to join an exclusive club and then getting to build a team from the 4 worst players on each roster. That's what happened under the old NHL expansion rules, which left teams such as the Nashville Predators and Columbus Blue Jackets without a playoff appearance for several seasons. I really think the NHL erred in how they treated the expansion teams all the way up until Vegas. Quote from former Nashville general manager David Poile told the Associated Press, quote, we made the previous team's trek much more difficult than it needed to be, end quote. Wow, is that really how it used to be? So after Foley paid $500 million for entry, the NHL changed its expansion draft rules to make Vegas competitive off the hop. The Knights could draft the 8th best forward, 4th best defenseman, or 2nd best goalie from each team. Ahead of the draft, Foley had interviewed several potential general managers, but he instantly felt George McPhee, who had led the Washington Capitals for nearly 20 years, was his guy. He wanted to win, and he didn't want anything to stand in his way of the Stanley Cup, period, Foley said. McPhee hired his scouts. Foley had oversight on other hockey operations jobs, signing off on assistant general manager Kelly McCrimmon. McPhee had a law degree. McCrimmon had a business degree. Quote, it was all about putting the right people in place in our hockey operations department. We were prepared, I can tell you that. That's the secret to our success, Foley said. McPhee and McCrimmon split the league in half. The new rules meant the teams would have to leave players they didn't want to lose unprotected. Let me read that again. The new rules meant that teams would have to leave players they didn't want to lose unprotected in the draft. The Knights had 2 undeniable advantages here: the leverage of the draft rules and a clean salary cap. They were ruthless and prepared, one NHL source recalled. The expansion draft was a moment of temporary insanity for many NHL general managers, and the Golden Knights exploited it. Consider how the following players, now Stanley Cup champions, ended up in Vegas. The Anaheim Ducks had to expose defensemen Josh Manson and Sami Vatanen. To entice Vegas to ignore them and select defenseman Clayton Stoner, the Ducks traded 21-year-old defenseman Shea Theodore to the Knights. He was second on the team in average ice time this postseason. Wow. Buffalo Sabres traded a 6th-round pick to Vegas so they'd select William Carrier in the draft instead of goalie prospect Linus Ullmark, who's now with the Bruins, I think. Carrier was the key component of the Knights' bruising checking line this postseason. The LA Kings dangled veteran forwards Dustin Brown and Marian Gaborik in front of McPhee. Instead, he selected 26-year-old Braden McNabb, who appeared in all but one playoff game in 2023. So then the Blue Jackets traded their 2017 first-round pick and center William Karlsson to the Knights, so they'd take David Clarkson's contract instead of either forward Josh Anderson or goaltender Joonas Korpisalo. Karlsson was one of the most valuable players in this cup run. Finally, the one that everybody knows about. The Florida Panthers, in one of the most mind-boggling moves in NHL history, traded forward Riley Smith to the Knights so Vegas would select 30-goal scorer Jonathan Marchessault in the draft. In turn, the Panthers would keep defenseman Mark Pysyk and Alex Petrovic. Florida GM Dale Talon said at the time that, quote, you win championships with defense. Turns out you also win them with Savage. Turns out you also win them with Jonathan Marchessault and Riley Smith. Ooh, get him. Quote, you know what? I thought they were going to protect me, Marchessault told ESPN this postseason. I was surprised at the decision, but I mean, that's just the way she goes sometimes. Keeps you honest. End quote. Back then, the Knights knew they had won the draft. Even if they had ended up trading these players they had gathered, they had done well. The rest of us, we were so wrong about the draft. The sportsbooks had Vegas at 250 to 1 to win the Stanley Cup. The worst odds in the league. The actual Newsweek headline on the expansion draft: the Vegas Golden Knights are going to suck in 2017 and 2018, and here's why. What neither the team nor its critics realized, the foundation for this championship team was laid by McPhee and McCrimmon in the expansion draft. Oh, goodness. Wow. Sometimes it was moves that led to future moves, like when the Minnesota Wild set up top prospect Alex Tuch to the Knights so that they'd select forward Eric Haula instead of players such as Matt Dumba or Marco Scandella. Tuch would be a key component of the Jack Eichel trade in 2021. Other times, it was using their cap space to acquire substantial talent immediately, like when Marc-Andre Fleury was selected from the Pittsburgh Penguins. But the most important part of that championship foundation was the building blocks themselves. Foley had an edict for his management team: find players who were team effort, low ego, low maintenance. McNabb would add another trait to that list: ferocity. We were a ferocious team, he said. We were playing fast, and it was hard on teams to keep up with us, and the belief set in, McNabb said. Marchessault said that remains the Knights' mindset. These guys, the guys that have been here since day one, they're all resilient guys, and they work hard, he said. And I think that sets the tone of everybody that comes there and kind of jumps on the same schedule as us. The thing about a startup, day one is the first day on the job for every employee. Those original Knights, cast aside by their teams for various reasons and dubbed the, quote, Golden Misfits, all landed on the same roster together at the same time. They were truly the island of misfit toys. In some ways, they remain that way today. We're the guys that weren't wanted, Coach Bruce Cassidy said, himself fired by the Bruins weeks before the Knights hired him last summer. Cassidy points to players such as Michael Amadio, a waiver pickup from Toronto, and Brett Howden, acquired via trade with the Rangers. They're not walking into a room and saying, geez, these guys were drafted and developed here and I'm an outsider. They walk into the room where Marchessault and Smith and other guys have been through this, he said. So they have that togetherness or bond or of maybe not being wanted the first time around by their teams. Of course, everyone's wanted until they're not. All right, we were going to catch a break. You are listening to The Neutral Zone on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We'll be back.
Damn! Green team! Set! Hey!
What's going on, football fans? This is me, your boy Larry, inviting you to join myself, Colin Reynolds, Mike Pat, and John Felipe for one of the most electrifying football shows you have ever heard. 3 and Out, right here at IE Sports Radio. Recap of the week before, a preview of what's to come, and of course, 3 hardcore head-to-head prime-time face-offs each week. You don't want to miss it.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, this is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always willing to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Are you a fan of Buffalo sports? Are you thinking of changing loyalties and becoming a Buffalo sports fan? Do you even know where Buffalo is on the map? Did you know Canada is closer to Buffalo than New York City? Welcome to the Buffalo Huddle, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 p.m. Pacific Coast Time on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'm your host, Patty Bax. This is a podcast designed for you, the passionate sports fan. I know you love your sports. Who doesn't? I cover Buffalo sports and so much more by bringing in the human elements. I call it Buffalo sports with a twist. Join me as we take a journey into the world of Buffalo sports. I guarantee you'll fall in love with Buffalo just like I did. Each week we start with an inspiration, question of the day, a Buffalo fun fact, and our weekly challenge to you, the listener. Come huddle up with me every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 p.m. Pacific Coast Time for the Buffalo Huddle with Patty Bax on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. As we say in Buffalo, go Bills!
And we're back. You're listening to The Neutral Zone on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Once again, I'm your host, Zach Puplis. Okay, so there's more to that article, but I think we got to move on. All right, Golden Knights Bruce Cassidy, proud to bring Vegas their second title. First being the Vegas Aces in the WNBA. And then last week, the Golden Knights, of course, winning the Stanley Cup. Vegas Golden Knights coach Bruce Cassidy played and coached in 3 established professional sports cities before arriving in Las Vegas. After the Golden Knights hosted the Stanley Cup in the team's 6th NHL season, and Cassidy's first as their coach, Sin City has become a 2-time titleist in less than a year after. The Las Vegas Aces won the WNBA championship last fall. Quote, Vegas has become a market just like all of the other major ones now, slowly but surely, Cassidy said Friday. You got to build some history to do that. And to build history, you got to win championships. So good for the Aces and good for us to get championships. End quote. Let's see here. Cassidy played in Chicago and coached in Washington and Boston before being hired as the third coach of the Golden Knights. When he was drafted to play for the Blackhawks back in '83, the franchise was 58 years old. Cassidy's current age. His next two stops ahead also had decades of pro sports history. Then came Las Vegas, which not too long ago wasn't even allowed to advertise its city as a tourist attraction during Super Bowl commercials. Cassidy's first thought after he took the Vegas job, quote, "You think of the Strip, right?" Well, I'm not the only guy to ever say that. End quote. But then he moved here and started seeing communities and neighborhoods, families and youth hockey teams, anything and everything but Las Vegas Boulevard. Exactly 1 year after his introductory news conference, he spoke with a bit of pride about his new place in Las Vegas's professional sports landscape. "It's obviously taking off," Cassidy said. "It's kind of nice to be a part of the infancy of this. I mean, I might look back when I'm 85 years old and say, I was there when it all started, which would be kind of cool." End quote. General Manager Kelly McCrimmon and Vice President of Hockey Operations, and President of Hockey Operations George McPhee, who have been with the Knights since their inception, have watched as the WNBA and NFL followed the NHL's move to Las Vegas. Quote, "In a sense, pro sports are now part of the identity of our city," McCrimmon said. "You look at those things that no one can ever take away from, you will always have the pride that comes from being the first one, the pride that comes with being, quote, Vegas born." McCrimmon mentioned the mass shooting at a music festival on October 1st, 2017, the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history, and the Golden Knights' debut just 9 days later. "Some of those things will never change," he said. "I expect we'll be overwhelmed tomorrow when we see the support that will be there for the parade." George talks about it all the time. Owner Bill Foley talks about it all the time, that we want to be part of the community. We want our players to be part of the community. Added McPhee, "Yes, it's great to have your name on a Stanley Cup. Yes, it's great to get a cup ring, but the experience with a group of players, that experience is amazing and rewarding, but the uplift that you give to a city is really what matters." I was listening to NHL Network Radio the other day, and they were talking about what it takes to win a cup, and that kind of fits in with what they were just saying. I forget who they were interviewing, but the guy said, "Well, you've heard the term, it takes a village to raise a child, right?" Well, he says, it takes this whole city to win a cup. I thought that was really cool. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the owners of the Vegas Golden Knights. Bill Foley. Him and the owner of the Panthers, actually, they both have West Point roots that are immersed in the Cup final. Foley and Viola, each graduated from U.S. Military Academy, continue to give back to their alma mater. From NHL.com, William Douglas. Students and alumni of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point are united by the unbreakable bond forged from being members of the Corps of Cadets. During the 2023 Stanley Cup Final, they are united by hockey. The Florida Panthers and the Vegas Golden Knights are competing for the Cup, and each franchise is owned by graduates of the prestigious 221-year-old academy in West Point, New York. Panthers owner Vincent Viola received his bachelor's degree from West Point in 77 and is a graduate of the U.S. Army Airborne, Air Assault, Infantry, and Ranger Schools and a former infantry officer in the 101st Airborne Division. Golden Knights owner Bill Foley earned his bachelor's degree from the Academy 10 years earlier, back in 67, and served in the U.S. Air Force, where he achieved the rank of captain. Their teams playing each other in the Stanley Cup Final is a source of pride and bragging rights at the Academy and throughout the West Point community. Vegas, as we know, Vegas won the series 4-1 to win the Stanley Cup. But the article continues. Quote, "It's really taken off within the classes," said Jamie Enos, Associate Director of Communications for the West Point Association of Graduates, the alumni association that supports the Academy's 55,000 living graduates. "We have a little friendly wager going on between the classes on which team will win the Stanley Cup." Supporting their classes, kind of donating money back and forth based on that. Army is extra excited because, quote, "We are in it, which is great, and Navy's not." So that's always a little bonus, said. "It's historic having these two owners coming out of the same college setting." Brian Riley, who has coached Army's NCAA Division I men's hockey team for nearly 2 decades, said, "A lot of people who aren't necessarily hockey fans have become hockey fans at West Point because of the ties, obviously, with Mr. Foley and Mr. Viola being graduates of the Academy. Even the owners are caught up with the West Point Stanley Cup fever." The Golden Knights and Panthers announced this past Saturday that Foley and Viola will jointly donate $100,000 to a veterans service organization of the Cup winner's choice. That's awesome. Foley selected the Folded Flag Foundation to receive a donation from Viola and the Panthers if Vegas wins. Viola chose Gold Star Teen Adventures to receive a donation from Foley and the Golden Knights if Florida wins. So, Folded Flag Foundation, because Vegas won, the Folded Flag Foundation will receive a donation from Viola and the Panthers. Each nonprofit organization helps children and families of military and law enforcement personnel who have died. "That just shows you what kind of men they are," said retired Army Lieutenant General Robert L. Caslin, who got to know both owners when he served as the 59th Superintendent of West Point from 2013 to 2018. "They're both leaders, officers, incredible entrepreneurs. They're both incredibly generous, loyal, and they have love for their alma mater." And they love their alma mater. There we go. Each has given back to West Point, an institution that they've credited with helping shape them into the people they are today. Foley and his wife pledged $15 million for an athletics center on the campus. He was also a lead donor in the Foley Enters Nath Lacrosse Center that opened in 2016. He shares the center's name with First Lieutenant Ray Enters and First Lieutenant Michael Nath, both members of West Point's class of 67, who were killed in action in the Vietnam War in 1968. Viola was the leading founding donor of the West Point Combating Terrorism Center, which recently celebrates its 20th anniversary and is a leading donor for the Academy's Mitchie Stadium Preservation Project. The Panthers and the Golden Knights reflect Viola and Foley's West Point roots. Shortly after Viola purchased the Panthers in 2013 as chairman and CEO of Virtu Financial, he took the organization's players and staff to the Academy. The Panthers returned for team-building activities in a preseason game against the New Jersey Devils on October 8th, 2016 at West Point's Tate Rink. Panthers defeated the Devils 4-2. He put them on the ice, and he had them practicing, but he also mingled them around the Corps of Cadets, mingled them around a lot of the West Point administration, Caslin said of Viola. He wanted them to understand the character, the culture that's necessary to win. He uses West Point as a foundation of what that culture looks like. Foley's fondness for West Point is literally weaved into the fabric of the Golden Knights, which joined the NHL in 2017 as an expansion team. Their colors, black, gold, and gray, closely match Army's color scheme. The Golden Knights' parent company is Black Knight Sports and Entertainment. The Golden Knights and Army settled a trademark dispute in 2018 that paved the way for the team to have the legal right to the name. Now the team's name and appearance in the Cup final with Viola's Panthers is the talk of West Point. Quote, "Everyone's real excited to see two very good people have success," said John Heller, a 1984 West Point grad and a retired Army captain who is CEO of Amentum, a government contractor in Maryland. Now, the profile that this brings to West Point as we're trying to recruit the best people to West Point and to see two highly successful people in such a high profile, we're pretty excited about that. So is Riley, who plans to use the Golden Knights Panthers Cup final as a new recruiting tool for prospective players. Quote, "Now one of my pitches will be to young men, hey, come to West Point and you can own an NHL hockey team." He said, I mean, it's pretty neat when you can sit down with a potential recruit and talk about the fact that Mr. Viola and Mr. Foley, both owners of NHL teams, are graduates of West Point. So, there you go. Salute to both the Stanley Cup teams and a salute to our troops as well. Let's see here. All right, let's do one more, and then I think it's already time to get out of here for tonight. Crazy. The Nuggets win the other night in basketball gives Stan Kroenke an NFL, an NHL, and an NBA title in 3 straight seasons. So, what a time to be alive, Stan Kroenke. It seems everything he touches turns to gold. This is from ESPN and the Associated Press, just like last week. Stan Kroenke's sports empire has produced an NFL, NHL, and now an NBA champion in 3 consecutive seasons. Latest title came Monday night when the Denver Nuggets won their first championship 47 years after joining the NBA. His LA Rams beat the Cincinnati Bengals 23-20 in the Super Bowl following the 2021 season. And his Colorado Avalanche hoisted the Stanley Cup last summer after dispatching the Tampa Bay Lightning in 6 games. Through the champagne spray and cigar smoke choking the Nuggets locker room following their rugged 94-89 win over Miami in Game 5, Kroenke reflected on his football, hockey, and basketball titles and couldn't pick one over the other. Quote, "It's like having children. You love them all," Kroenke said. "It's unbelievably exciting. I'm just so happy for everybody involved, particularly the city, which for 47 years has never had this." End quote. Nuggets were a founding franchise in the old ABA and played for the league's championship in 1976, falling in 6 games to Julius Erving's New York Nets. Later that year, the NBA absorbed those teams, along with the Spurs and the Pacers, both of whom made the finals long before Denver did. The Nuggets didn't play for another league title until this year, and their clincher came 55 years, 7 months, and 28 days after the team won its first game in franchise history over the Anaheim Amigos. Wow. After the game, they talked to Kroenke, and he was saying that they didn't have an easy time dispatching the number 8 seed Miami Heat. Quote, "It was a dogfight," Kroenke said in a rare interview, which seems mostly to come in locker room celebrations of late. I mean, that's how they play. They're tough. It's a great organization. Great coach. Pat Riley's amazing. His influence on basketball, the number of championships, just how clever they are with everything. But that was a dogfight, and for our guys to go out there and persevere and win that thing, that was awesome. Wow. His Rams didn't get past the Bengals easily in the Super Bowl either, and the Avalanche got all they could handle from the Lightning last year too. Quote, "No, and I always say if you want to win a championship, you got to go get it," Kroenke said. "Nobody's going to make it available to you, and the guys over there are really good." Kroenke's hope is that this year is just the start of a long Nuggets run, and that unlike the Rams and Avalanche, they can defend their title in 24. Quote, "We've got a great group," Kroenke said. So, congratulations to his Denver Nuggets, and for probably the best 3-year run of any owner that has multiple teams in multiple sports ever. Okay, so Adam wanted to discuss this a little bit tonight too. So we'll discuss this and then get out of here for tonight. And next week we'll talk some Arizona and some plastic rats on the ice, or maybe it's octopi or catfish or pink flamingos. NHL Power Rankings, way too early edition for 23-24. I gotta love how they do this with any sport. You know, the team wins a championship, and the next day they already have way too early preseason rankings for the following season. Vegas Golden Knights are the 2023 Stanley Cup champs, joining the distinguished list of the NHL's best. And now their title defense begins. As we await the 2023 NHL draft, along with free agency and trade season. Oh, yeah, we'll be talking about the draft next week, too. The Connor Bedard sweepstakes likely going to Adams Blackhawks. As we wait the 2023 NHL draft, along with free agency and trade season, it's time for the way too early edition of the 2023-24 NHL Power Rankings, voted on by the extended ESPN hockey family. Along with the ranking, we present the big things we're watching this summer for each club, courtesy of Ryan S. Clark, Christian Chilton, and Greg Wyshynski. How we rank. A panel of ESPN hockey commentators, analysts, reporters, and editors rates teams against one another, and those results are tabulated to produce the featured list here. Okay, so number one, he's got Vegas, previous ranking 5, and the way they finished, obviously, Stanley Cup champion. Everything Adin Hill did in the Stanley Cup playoffs reinforces why the Golden Knights, or any team in need of a goaltender, would want his services for 23 and 24 and beyond. Maybe even Edmonton! That's been one of my hot picks the last 2 years, and it hasn't panned out. Probably because of goaltending. And if the Golden Knights re-sign Hill, what does that mean for Robin Lehner and the 2 years that he has left on his contract at $5 million annually? Number 2, New Jersey Devils. Number 3, Colorado Avalanche. They were number 8 before. They finished this year with a first-round loss in the playoffs. How will Colorado manage their cap space? Losing Gabriel Landeskog for what looks like an entire season will see their captain potentially miss 2 full campaigns. But moving his salary to long-term injured reserve does create a temporary solution for the team that has contract questions to answer elsewhere. 4, Dallas. 5, Boston. Boston's previous ranking was 1. The way they finished this year was a first-round loss. Boston has key negotiation looming with restricted free agent Jeremy Swayman. 24-year-old played in tandem with Linus Ullmark, who signed through 24-25 in a successful 22-23 regular season that ended in playoff heartbreak. How will the Bruins balance their current and future goaltending situation in critical talks with Swayman in his camp? My question is, I mean, they can't do much better in the regular season than they did this year. But they just couldn't even get out of the first round. That's just so wild. Nobody saw that coming. I mean, everybody had them going to at least the Eastern Conference Finals. 6 Hurricanes, 7 Oilers. Oilers were number 10. They lost in the second round. Being in a championship window comes with both advantages and challenges. Now is the time to strike for the Oilers, who must not waste another year of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl's primes. Of course, they must improve their roster with less than $6 million in cap space, and breakout defenseman Evan Bouchard needs a new contract. 8, Tampa Bay. 9, Florida. 10, New York Islanders. 11, Maple Leafs. 12, Rangers. 13, Sabres. 14, Wild. 15, Kings. 16, Kraken. There are a few captivating situations to monitor for the Kraken this summer. How will they structure a new deal for Vince Dunn? In general, how will they deploy a projected $20.3 million in cap space to improve their roster? Perhaps most importantly, how can the team get Philip Grubauer to harness his postseason success into something more consistent? 17, Ottawa. 18, Calgary. 19, Detroit. Red Wings are desperate to add more scoring. How aggressive is GM Steve Yzerman willing to be and to give the team a boost up front? Does he go after someone like Alex DeBrincat in a trade? Target a veteran like Alex Killorn in free agency? It feels like the Red Wings could be on the cusp of contention, but only if Yzerman can pull the right threads. 20, Predators. 21, Penguins. 22, Jets. 23, Capitals. 24, Blues. 25, Canucks. 26, Canadiens. 27, Blue Jackets. 28, Blackhawks. Blackhawks stripped their roster down to the foundations in an attempt to secure the first overall pick. Now that Connor Bedard is on the way, how hard will GM Kyle Davidson go to surround him with talent this early in his career? 29, Philadelphia Flyers. 30, Arizona Coyotes. 31, Sharks. 32, Anaheim Ducks. Sorry, Taryn. This will be one of the most important offseasons in recent franchise history. Beyond hiring a teacher in coach Greg Cronin and whatever the Ducks decide to do with the number 2 pick, there's also the matter of signing Jamie Drysdale, Troy Terry, and Trevor Zegras to new contracts. Okay, there we go. That's the horn. That means it's time to get out of here. You've been listening to The Neutral Zone on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Once again, I'm your host, Zach Puplis. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We want to thank once again our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised, MLOS Great, Key to the Gate, and Anonymous, as well as Larry and Taryn and everybody back at the channel. And we'll be back next week to talk a little more off-season hockey, some NHL draft, and before we take a bit of a summer break eventually. So, all right, you all have a great night, and we will see you next week. Don't get put in the penalty box. Don't get checked into the boards. Protect your 5-hole and light the lamp. Peace, everybody. Good night.